What do you mean today is the last lecture? It is the last lecture for the semester. There is no more content. All right, self-factors of motivation. Just like, and I believe I'm 98%, I think graduate students, there's 2 more of you that I have to get to who chose to do the learning styles analysis for React number 4. All the undergraduates have been graded for React number 4. Grad students, there was some glitch with my eCampus over the weekend, and I forgot to get back to you guys. So I think I have like 1 or 2 more graduate students to get to their 602 React number 4. But by and large, you guys are a very interpersonal, visual group. When I looked at the learning styles for those who chose to analyze that, we also have a couple of ag science students in here, ag education students, and so there's very high-end naturalist or nature type as well. So it was interesting to see those type of profiles come out, which is always why I like doing videos and embedded graphics in these. So I even had a couple of commentaries about how that really helps them with the organization of information. So today, 3 things we're going to be looking at. These are known as the self-factors of motivation. So just to kind of give a recap, we've talked about approaches to motivation, what motivation is, differing types, intrinsic versus extrinsic. Then we led in, last week we finished up with needs, goals, goal-directed behavior, interests, state type versus trait type, and those kind of paved the way for today's lecture, beliefs, the thing in the middle, attributions, which we're going to spend the most time on, and then emotions. So let's look at beliefs first. Beliefs and self-perception. When we analyze beliefs and self-perception, what we're talking about are the facts that beliefs about our ability, really tapping back into self-efficacy, but beliefs about our own abilities in a certain area are most powerful sources of motivation. Prominent factors in explaining motivation for a specific task. And a belief is simply an individual conceptualization. An individual conceptualization of an outcome. An individual conceptualization of an outcome. What we think. Now, what we think is informed by a lot of factors, isn't it? It's informed by people's influence. It's informed by past experiences. It's informed by past difficulty. It's informed by a lot of different things, but they're individual conceptualizations about an outcome or a task. What we think will happen. Beliefs are future-oriented. Beliefs are not a reaction to something that has happened. Belief is related to something that is about to occur. Saw today that our football game is, once again, we're not having football this weekend. It's been postponed again. Lots of belief that, the Aggies will win out, make the national championship or college playoff scenario, however you deem that there. Now, those beliefs about our football team's destination are partly informed by what? Their ability, their talents, those things that they bring to any task or goal-oriented setting. Then we have aspects of cause and control. Cause and control have to do with self-determination, whether we're choosing to engage in something. Also, how much input we have on the outcome. You ever heard it's fixed, it's rigged, there's no way I'll succeed, there's no way I'll make it. My daughter tried out for the 6th grade volleyball team, or the volleyball team at her middle school. Now, she's 6th grade. She didn't make it. And she was really disappointed about that. But she looked at her ability, and then she looked at those things. And one of the things, only worry about what you can control. You can't worry about anything else. And so cause and control are these outside influences. Cause and control are outside influences that we really have no input or impact on. We can bring into any sort of task or scenario our ability. We cannot control those things that are extraneous. For a football game, you can't control the weather. You can't control the referees. You can't control the motivations of other teams and what they're playing for and pride, those type of things. You can't control what the other team does. And finally, self-worth. Self-worth is made up of those aspects of self-concept and self-esteem. Now, specifically, when we look at self-worth and beliefs, it's how much our self-concept is tied to an outcome. How much your self-worth is tied or related to a desired or a wished or a hoped for outcome. So we're going to look at these kind of in sequence. So we're going to start off with beliefs about ability. And when we look at ability, we have another, look at this, EI designation. Ability is being viewed as either something that is entity or ability view that is incremental. When you look at your own ability about something and you have an entity view, what that means is that your belief for your ability for a certain task is fixed. Belief that ability, your ability level, is fixed. Not like rigged, but cannot be changed. You have a certain level. You can't improve that level. It stays the same. Entity, belief that your ability is a characteristic that cannot be changed. On the flip side, incremental views of ability. Belief, if you have an incremental view, it is your belief that ability is a set of skills that can be learned or changed. A set of skills that can be learned or changed. Belief that is ability that is a set of skills that can be learned or changed. Now, last lecture, we talked about the role of failure in learning. We're going to come back and revisit that. And one of the things that we said is that for someone who's learning how to play the piano, making mistakes initially is part of the learning process. You don't get better unless you give some effort and you get feedback. And in fact, we use the phrase, practice makes, and y'all completed it, perfect. That's what the difference between entity and incremental view is. If you look at this, someone with an incremental view of ability says that my piano playing ability is a set of skills that can be changed. If I work harder at this, if I practice, if I devote myself to it, I can get better. So their ability mindset is one, and we're going to come back, we're going to look at mindsets here in a second, means that their ability can increase. I'm going to give you a term. An incremental view of ability is an unstable view. It's unstable. Unstable simply means it does not remain the same over time. Contrast that to an entity view, which takes the view that our ability at something is stable. It's fixed. It cannot be changed. Now you're going to see some overlay here in a second. Incremental is unstable. Now that sounds like that's a negative aspect. Why would you want an unstable view of ability? Well, you do because you think that you can get better at something. If you go into piano lessons saying, I can't learn this, and slam the keyboard down, quit in frustration, your contention is that I cannot get better at piano. Why am I even bothering with this? And certain people search or approach academic tasks like that. Why am I doing this? I don't have skills in this. I'll never be able to do this. Why should I try? Now you can think about those two approaches and how they'll impact motivation. If someone thinks that they've applied themselves and can get better at it, there's a different level of motivation. Whereas someone who looks at a task saying, I'm not going to get good at this at all, Why? Two different levels of motivation right there. Now, you might have seen in hallways of elementary schools a theorist. Her name is Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. Love her theories. And she's known for categorizing this entity versus incremental view using the labels of mindset. And a mindset is simply a cognitive view that individuals develop for themselves. A cognitive view that individuals develop for themselves. A cognitive view that individuals develop for themselves. So if you look at this next slide up here, we've looked at entity views as they compare to incremental views of ability. We've talked about these two terms, static versus mired, you cannot change, versus dynamic and malleable, changeable. We've added two new terms, fixed mindset and growth mindset. Carol Dweck has done a lot of work on this, and I've got a quick TED Talk video. I used to use this as the basis of the React for this unit. I've changed the React for this unit, but this was the old React that I viewed. I'm not going to show you the entire video, but I want to have you see kind of how she conveys these two things together. Zoom room, let me hear you guys. Can you see and then hear this when I hit play? Chime in once I hit play.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Of yet. I heard about a high school in Chicago where students had to pass a certain number of courses to graduate, and if they didn't pass a course, they got the grade not yet. And I thought that was fantastic, because if you get a failing grade, you think, I'm nothing, I'm nowhere. But if you get the grade not yet, you understand that you're on a learning curve. It gives you a path into the future. Not yet also gave me insight into a critical event early in my career, a real turning point. I wanted to see how children coped with challenge and difficulty. So I gave 10-year-olds problems that were slightly too hard for them. Some of them reacted in a shockingly positive way. They said things like, I love a challenge. Or, I was hoping this would be informative. They understood that their abilities could be developed. They had what I call a growth mindset. But other students felt it was tragic, catastrophic. From their more fixed mindset perspective, their intelligence had been up for judgment, and they failed. Instead of luxuriating in the power of yet, they were gripped in the tyranny of now. So what do they do next? I'll tell you what they do next. In one study, they told us they would probably cheat the next time instead of studying more if they failed a test. In another study, after a failure, they looked for someone who did worse than they did so they could feel really good about themselves. And in study after study, they have run from difficulty. Scientists measured the electrical activity from the brain as students confronted an error. On the left, you see the fixed mindset students. There's hardly any activity. They run from the error. They don't engage with it. But on the right, you have the students with the growth mindset, the idea that abilities can be developed. They engage deeply. Their brain is on fire with yet. They engage deeply. They process the error. They learn from it, and they correct it. How are we raising our children? Are we raising them for now instead of yet? Are we raising kids who are obsessed with getting A's? Are we raising kids who don't know how to dream big dreams? Their biggest goal is getting the next A or the next test score? And are they carrying this need for constant validation with them into their future lives? Maybe because employers are coming to me and saying, we have already raised a generation of young workers who can't get through the day without an award. So, what can we do? How can we build that bridge to yet? Here are some things we can do.
All right, I'll let you see those tips. I'll send the video out. But I think she's got a point. And that's what's the basis of the React there. Again, the concept of yet. And I don't want you guys to miss that. I haven't accomplished this yet. Wouldn't that be great if you get your report card and it says not yet instead of F, NY instead of F? And it just shows that you can continue to grow. You're not tied to that one singular outcome or result. So, with that in mind, that's beliefs about ability. Now we get to aspects of cause and control. And when we talk about aspects of cause and control, this is where we make attributions. Now, I need everyone engaged on this. This is probably, in this unit, the most difficult theory to really grasp. So I need you kind of in the here and the now, because it really kind of builds on everything we've just talked about, the first two lectures plus some of the terms that we've talked about before. Attribution-based theory. Now, when we look at attributions are an individual's explanations as to the cause of an event or behavior. An individual's explanations as to the cause of an event or behavior. More importantly, an attribution is something that we do. We use it to understand, comprehend, or justify. We use attributions to understand, comprehend, or justify our successes or our failures. We use attributions to understand, comprehend, or justify our successes or our failures. Attributions looks at a series of determinations. And so attribution really has a three-step process. When we make an attribution, number one, we have to engage in the behavior or activity itself. So let's just use a test in this class. You take test number one. Okay, that's step number one. You get a sample of, or you get a score. In essence, a behavior is engaged, and you get feedback on that behavior. Number two, we have to assume that the activity we engaged in was intentful or purposeful. It wasn't done on accident. It wasn't incidental. This is something that we deliberately engaged in. It might not be something we chose, but it's something we chose to do. It might not be something that we picked that was our first choice. I'm sure you would have better things to do in an evening than take a test in this class. So we might not have chosen it, but we chose to do it. And the last aspect is, so we engaged in this act. It was an intentional act that we meant to do. And number three, we then look at the outcome. And we examine our successes or failures based on different determination or determinational dimensions. In essence, we seek to explain. And we have a 3D view, three-dimensional view of how we can categorize or explain or justify or understand the outcome that resulted. So let's look at these then. Attributions, attribution theory, attributional style. Now, here are the three dimensions: locus, stability, and control. We've engaged in the act, it was deemed to be purposeful, and then we are using these three dimensions to explain what happened. Now, you've seen the term locus before. We've looked at locus with regards to where the learning is located, and of course, we've used it. Here's your third IE distinction. We've had intrinsic versus extrinsic. We've had entity versus incremental. And now we have an internal or external locus of control. You can probably imagine then, when we use our locus to provide explanations as to why we did what we did, internal means it was something that was result of our characteristics, something that is internally looking. In essence, I didn't do well on that test because I didn't study. That's an internal locus of control. Where do you place it? You place it inward. Some people would call this introspection. You kind of search, man, why didn't I do well? Well, I didn't study. I didn't go to class. I. External means that you look for external reasons or causes why you didn't do well. I didn't do well on that test because Dr. J's a jerk. And he writes weird test questions, and I haven't even watched Big Bang Theory. I have no idea what's going on. But the explanation has nothing to do with you. It has to deal with individuals or other environmental influences. So whether it's pointed inward or, wait, where's my camera? Which rotates, or outward. There it is. Okay, inward or outward. That's the power of cinema, high definition, coming to you. Guys, I'm not wearing tinfoil today. It just looks like it. I'm not a Freebirds burrito. I just really feel like I'm coming off the screen with this massive, like, silvery glint. I mean, you can kind of compare the Torchy's tacos, like, who wore it better? We can hold this up and we can see. But I didn't think about how this would look on camera, and it doesn't look that well. I was really excited about this. This is supposed to be my Mississippi outfit, and I'm not going to get a chance to wear it, and now I look like a big burrito on screen. So anyway, that's locus. Now, stability. Stability, stable or unstable. Now, guess what? You've seen that before, right? Whether the cause of the outcome stays the same over time or whether it fluctuates. Does this change? Does it change over time or not? So let's look at this in the context of the tests that you take in this class. When you look at how well you do on the tests, and you can look at the format of the tests, one thing that I try hard to do is keep really the format the same. So you can say, really, there's not a lot of differences in the styles of questions that are written. However, what does change? The content. So you could have two arguments here from time to time. Is my performance on these tests stable over time, represents consistent performance over this, or is it relatively unstable, meaning that the task demands change? A&M football team. Are all games created equal in the SEC? No. We gravitate on the schedule and we look at who first? Alabama. Now, you would certainly say that some opponents are more difficult than others. That's stable versus unstable. Across the season, guess what? They even out. But if you're looking at, we lost that game because we prepared well, or we lost that game because we played Alabama. Okay? That's internal versus stable. We can look at the effort over time versus external and unstable. That opponent was really difficult. So does that task difficulty stay the same over time? Whatever you're being asked to do or engage in. Whether there's something that was really hard in the moment, you would say that that's unstable. It's just something that was fluctuating. Finally, the last aspect. Do I have any control over that outcome or not? Controllable. Do you have any control over test writing? No. Okay, you would certainly say that my tests are something that I would argue are stable, but for y'all, uncontrollable. I mean, there's really nothing you can do with regards to the test. Now, you can look at your effort on how you prepare and your actions coming to class. There's a subtle difference between the stability and control. Stability is just whether this stays the same over time. How does that task change over time? Controllability has every aspect of, do I have any influence on the outcome or not? Can I control the situation? Now, control is a key factor because it influences how much effort that we might be able to give. We're going to look at that here in a second. I've got a video that'll show that. Pretty shocking video about, who likes elephants? Anyone here like elephants? There's a shocking video about elephants and controllability that we'll talk about here in a second, because if you don't feel like you have control, what typically happens? You give up. If you feel like you have no control over the outcome. Now, control doesn't mean controlling the schedule making. Control doesn't mean, it just means, does my effort have an impact? Control in this sense, does my effort, does my engagement, can I influence the outcome, or is it beyond my control? So you might not be able to control the questions on a test, but you can control how much you study for a test. Now, again, it's going to be where you put the influence. Could you not control the outcome because the test was too hard, or could you really look introspectively and say, you can see the difference between something that's internal and controllable versus something that you would say is external and uncontrollable? It's all about how you explain successes or failures. You can certainly have two people who view something very, very different. But controllability all has to do with effort. Does my effort, does my motivation, do I have the ability to control the outcome? There are certainly things that you have no influence over, but this controllability aspect is key. So therefore, what we have is we have these three dimensions. One of the things I'm going to hold you to is a 2x2 grid. We're going to take the dimensions of locus and stability. Right now, controllability, it's hard to categorize because controllability all is about individual perceptions. But we use the locus dimension and the stability dimension. And you've seen this before. You can have really a 2x2 grid in which we label possible what we call attributional styles. Attributional styles. Now, this is the work of a gentleman named Wiener. Let's see. Okay, I want to get this way. Bernard Wiener, W-E-I-N-E-R, not Wiener Building. You don't have to know the spelling of his name, but it's kind of important to know who came up with this theory. This is his view, his categorization. Now, with that said, you might not agree with these labels. I don't know if I 100% agree with these labels, but this is one of the most pervasive theories that's out there with regards to attributional styles and ways that we can categorize the beliefs and explanations that people have. So the very first thing that we have, ability. Do we think that that is something, if I kind of scroll this up here for a second, I'll give you the first one. Look at something, our ability, if it's internal versus external. First of all, is our ability, internal versus external? It's internal, okay? Ability is something that is internal. So when we look at ability, do you think that's something that would be viewed as stable or unstable? Stable, for the most part, when we look at ability. Now, what this does, this theory completely ignores entity versus incremental views. So what we just talked about, ability is a set of skills that can be changed versus ability, it doesn't consider that. It says that our stable internal view of an outcome, if we base it on ability, falls here. So then what do you think goes in the pink box? Of the three that are left, effort, luck, and task difficulty, which is the only one left that deals with an internal aspect? Effort. Okay, how much effort we give is unstable because it's not consistent over time. How hard you work at something, how many hours you study, how dedicated you are. So effort is placed in here. Now, this is the one that most people have the biggest contention with, the notion of luck. Notion of luck. When we look at kind of the luck aspect, people will place luck here into something that is unstable and external. We can't control how fortunate we were on a given day. We can't control these aspects. This is all that deals with serendipity and just things that you couldn't imagine happened, didn't happen, just luck, random happenstance, chance. When you look at a test, have you ever kind of like guessed right on so many different questions? Or the flip thing, you guessed wrong on 5 because you were between the right answer and the wrong answer, and then 5 times in a row you went the wrong way. That's luck. I mean, even percentages says you should get half of those right, but percentages went against you. That's bad luck. Okay, in a football game, you might say, oh, that was unfortunate. It was raining and all of that different type thing. And so all these factors, it was unlucky. We didn't get a justified outcome, not because of something we did, but because of what? Changing circumstances. That's why it's unstable. That's why it's external. I think luck is too vague of a term. I don't know what I would call it. I just think it doesn't really conceptualize what he's trying to go for here. But that's the term that's being used here for this. Well, that gives you one box. And here's the other kind of issue I have with this. They're going to categorize task difficulty as stable. They're going to look at the difficulty of a task as being consistent over time. Again, task difficulty is something that is external, not due to something you did. But I even would say that even in this class, even though I try to keep the formats of you would probably say that all these tests for you would not have been completely equal, not stable over time. You can look at your change in grades, but not even looking at the grades, you might say, man, that was an easier test, that was a harder test. You would argue that maybe these task difficulties, much as we try to hold it steady, that's why I kind of look at this task difficulty as not being perhaps the 100% best. I don't know what I would put there. I just don't think that when you look at that, you don't naturally say, oh yeah, task difficulty, that's stable. So especially when we think about how we conceive that. But for the purpose of his theory and this knowledge, you need to know this 2x2 grid. As you can imagine, you're going to a pretty creative way. Actually, my question's about superheroes that deals with this. So I might change it for this next time, even though I like my superhero question. You might see superheroes engaging in attributional styles. And if so, could you be able to identify what an internal stable, according to Wehner, I'm going to preface it like that. According to Wehner's attributional style theory, I will also say your book does a good job of explaining this. It really does. And I think where some students get confused is when we talk about these dimensions of locus, stability, and control, we ascribe them to things that are common experiences amongst this class right here. But then your head, you're like, well, wait, no, those tests weren't equal. Those tasks were difficult. Those even graduate students across the learning project and the development project, are those projects the same? They're worth the same amount of points. Some of you might have had a harder time with this learning project than you do. That's what I'm talking about here. Sometimes we look at these labels and we're like confused. Don't read into it. It's just the way that they categorize based off stable, unstable. Now, the one thing that's missing is control. Don't worry, we're going to get to that. But for the purpose of this, if we're going to add control into this, it makes it a very messy. I don't want to do a 3D diagram on this. So we don't have to worry about the aspect of control. There is a version of this flowchart that adds in control, but we don't have to know that for the purpose of this. So now we get to self-worth. Remember, this is tied into aspects of self-concept, self-esteem, the affective part of beliefs, the affective component, the emotional, the psychological component. Emotional and psychological component. Now, there's lots of graphics on these screens. We've got monkeys engaged in different activities up there. We have three different views of self-worth. Now, some of these you're going to recognize because I've teased them before. Now, we've looked at in our lecture yesterday or on Wednesday of last week, we distinguished between those students who are mastery-oriented. Mastery-oriented students believe an incremental view of ability. They do so for intrinsic reasons. And here's all things that we can categorize mastery-oriented individuals by. When you derive good feelings of self-worth out of an outcome, it's a combination of several different aspects we've talked about before. First of all, these individuals believe failure is a function of learning. We distinguish between task-involved learners and ego-involved learners. Do you want to get better for your own skills, or you want to get better to demonstrate that to others? Here, the accomplishment for the individual is what makes them feel satisfied. They certainly possess an incremental view of ability. They're motivated by intrinsic factors. So they are double I's. Intrinsically motivated by aspects of the task itself. And they believe that their ability at a given task can be changed or improved. I. Incremental improvements through failure, intrinsically motivated. As far as attributional styles, they have an internal style. They attribute successes to what? Effort, strategies. If you're looking about ways to increase the self-worth of your children or your students, having them have a mastery-oriented view is the best view of ability and self-worth that you can muster in them. Giving them credit for things they do well, successes. Helping them see that they do not have a fixed mindset and that their ability is not stunted or stopped. It can always increase. Now, Carol Dweck talked about these second group of scholars here. Failure avoiding students. When we look at failure avoiding students, these are students that will be motivated for perhaps entity views and extrinsic reasons. So failure avoiding students see failure as a negative, pervasive outcome. They want to avoid it at all possible. They're driven by performance-oriented results, feeling good when they compare well to their peers. In contrast to mastery-oriented individuals, the one thing that they worry about is that they believe that their ability doesn't have a lot of room for improvement. So they adopt more of an entity view of ability. And what failure-avoiding students are likely to do, and we teased this on Wednesday as well, is adopt two strategies. They either adopt things that are known as self-defeating or self-promoting. Now, this is a recap from what we talked about Wednesday. Self-defeating strategies are where they set performance goals that are way too high. They have no chance of meeting those, but it really kind of protects them. Failure was inevitable. So they explain that as something that they were going to fail no matter what. That's one way of protecting their self-worth. If they view failures as inevitable, they don't feel as bad as the outcome, because they never had a chance to succeed. It kind of buffers them from the sting of not doing well. Now, on the flip side, what failure avoiding students will also do is something called self-promoting strategies. And they'll set performance goals that are very, very easy to accomplish. And so therefore their self-worth is boosted when they do well at something. But the reality was it was very easily accomplished, well within their grasp. But when you do something like that, you know you can't fail. But for these individuals, it's all about that extrinsic motivation, performance-oriented standards, demonstrating your skills next to other individuals. You feel like you really can't improve much. In fact, you use other people's abilities as a means of comparison. And so therefore you might adopt these self-promoting or self-defeating handicaps. Those are the strategies to protect their self-worth from failure. And then, gang, this is the hardest thing for you as a future educator, a youth development advocate, a social worker to deal with. When you have a student who isn't just failure avoiding, they really have a failure accepting orientation. Their self-worth has, over a period of time, diminished consistently. And what has happened is they have a series of cyclical failures. A series of cyclical failures. And so ultimately, what these kids do is stop trying. Failure avoiding kids can be shown that effort does have a result. You can shift failure avoiding if you get them to move from an entity view of ability to an incremental view of ability. You can shift them on a different track. The hardest thing to do with these failure accepting kids is get them to equate effort with results. They've had such a pervasive and systemic history of failing at something that they really just completely disconnect. If you see in blue, it's hard to see on the screen here just based on the lighting in the classroom. Lack of ability is cause of failure, and you cannot control the outcome. Don't miss the relevance of that statement. They make internal attributions. I'm failing because of me. Not for anything going on. This is mine. I can't. The cause of my failure is me, internal. And they view that no matter the effort, they cannot control the outcome. Don't tell me to try. I can never get this. Trying to give a motivational speech to a kid who's been socially promoted and passed from grade to grade and has had no history of success or equating effort with results, getting them to engage, to be motivated in a classroom is almost impossible. We call this learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is really distinguished by this pervasive and historical sense of the fact that your outcomes cannot be controlled. The video's not playing on me. Hold on, let me get to... All right, here we go. Yes, we'll do this one.
What is learned helplessness? Well, in India, when elephant trainers catch a baby elephant, they tie its legs with a rope to a post. And this baby elephant will struggle for days trying to break free, and it eventually gives up when it learns that it's useless. When it grows up, these trainers keep it tied using the same rope. And even though it's now strong enough to break free and escape, the elephant stands around waiting for the trainers because it's learned that it's meaningless. This elephant has developed what's known as learned helplessness, and this is the fact that despite having the power to change its situation, it's learned to feel helpless instead because of the past. It was identified by a scientist in the 1960s who do the same thing by shocking dogs.
Let's deal with this right. Shocking dogs. Wait till you see what he did. This was actually an interesting experiment. Look at the poor puppy. Don't you just see the face right there? But this is really interesting what he did, Seligman did, in the outcome. First of all, pretty neat about the elephants. I mean, that a baby elephant can't break free, and then a grown elephant won't even try. It has the power to change its circumstances, but won't exude the effort. All right, here's...
Highly unethical, of course. But what does this have to do with us?
Well, he didn't go through the
in your life, you may have experienced...
Seligman experiment. What he did, without showing the video, he had dogs, and he had dogs in these cages. And these cages had either a way to escape or a way not to escape. And these cages were also electrified. And so what he would do is he would give these dogs a series of shocks. There was a stimulus, a light came on, and if the dog could escape the shock, it would jump over a barrier and it would escape the shock if they had the ability to escape. And so dogs realized that quickly if this light went on, just like we talked about, stimulus response, right? That if the light went on, it meant a shock was going to occur, and so they would get out of the way. But dogs that had no ability to escape, okay, the room was enclosed, they had no ability to escape, they got shocked. It didn't matter what they did. Claw at the cage, yelp, cry, scream, and these dogs had some really negative reactions to these shocks. They learned that no matter what they did, they couldn't avoid the shock. And so what they did then is they put the dogs who had been continuously shocked in these rooms in which they couldn't escape into the rooms of the dogs that could escape. And they did the same thing. They put the light on. What do you think dogs that had previously experienced no ability to escape the shock did when they're put in these new crates? When the light came on, instead of jumping the fence like the other dogs did or jumping the barrier, they simply laid down and took the shock. They didn't resist. That's learned helplessness. And they should have used cats. No, just kidding. I mean, that's the nature of that. Can you think of an instance in which you say, you know what, I give up. I'll just lay down and take the shock. And you have the power to change your circumstances, but because of this historic experience that no matter the effort, failure is inevitable, you don't. The main contingency here for this learned helplessness, this failure accepting, is control. That people in this mindset, this self-worth viewpoint, have had a history of low or no control. And they do not equate any amount of effort or internal aspects as being able to change their circumstance. Gang, if you get a student like that, you need to work with them and help them make that connection. Because unless someone shows that effort will result in outcome, they will consistently, in an academic standpoint, in a professional standpoint, in a relationship, lay down and take the shock. And so a lot of you that I'm speaking today will have the power to reach kids. And guys, you will see it. I saw it when I taught elementary school. Only for 1 year, you can still see it. Those kids who will lay down and take the shock. So I guess it's the emotions. Now, emotional impact. This is the affective piece. When we look at emotions, we have emotions based off how we feel when we are engaged in an activity itself. Those are known as activity emotions. The emotions that we feel when we're engaged in the activity itself. Enjoyment, contentedness, boredom, fatigue. Emotions that are experienced in the learning setting, the achievement setting. Then we have outcome emotions, otherwise known as achievement emotions. These are emotions that we tie to the results. We have emotions related to hope, or maybe anxiety, pride, anger, shame. When we talk about emotions, and I can't not show you this video. This is my favorite video that I show in any. Let me show you the outcome emotions of a dog named Denver. Has anyone ever heard of a dog named Denver? All right. Here we go. Wait for it. I don't know what commercial.
Designs start with you. Canva is the simple design tool.
All right, well, apparently while I was out, somebody got into the kitty cat treats. Now, I'm gonna go look at the suspects. Suspect number 1. Was it you, Macy? See your face. Did you do this? Did you? I don't think you did. Number 2. What? Did you do this? Denver, did you do this? Denver, was this you? Denver, you won't look at me. Did you? What? Denver, did you do this? Look at me. Come here. Let me see. Let me see your face. Oh my goodness, Denver, you didn't. You did this? What? You got into kitty cat's treats? While I was gone? I can't believe it. Are you sorry about it? Okay. You know the routine. In the kennel. Go on. Very disappointed. You're in the penalty box. You let it happen.
So, Denver actually went on to get his own Doritos commercial. Denver actually passed on last year, so it's they had a big tribute to Denver, the guilty dog. But guilt, anyone ever felt like that after a test? Okay, or you feel guilty or those. It's all about the emotions you feel after it's over, not the emotions you feel during, but the emotions that you feel afterwards. Now, those are all tied to aspects of arousal. Now, arousal is really something interesting. Arousal defined is this physical and physiological level of alertness. A physical and physiological level of alertness. Physical and physiological level of alertness specific to a given task. Physical and physiological level of alertness specific to a given task. So when you say that your heart is racing before an important test, or anyone ever get an email that you're waiting and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, you don't want to open it, and you're clicking, am I going to get it, am I not? You can feel that skin response and the sweaty hands and the racing heartbeat and all the things. That's arousal. Okay, it has things to do with pupil dilation and galvanometric skin responses and heart rate and digestion. By the way, if anyone ever gets nervous before a test, I was actually told this by a neuropsychologist. Well, not told this, but I was at a conference and they talked about this. If you ever get really this debilitating test anxiety, one of the things that they suggested to help calm these nerves, there's a very natural remedy. There's enzymes in apples that if you eat an apple about 30 minutes prior to a test, it actually has a calming presence. And one of the things that you will sometimes see if you feel like your stomach is churning, one of the ways that people internalize stress is they actually start the digestive process. So if you feel your stomach churning, what this does is actually you have to manifest that stress, that nervous energy somehow. And so a lot of people internalize it and manifest it inward. And so the enzymes in an apple, once digested, have a natural and calming effect on the body. So if you're someone who, hey, couldn't hurt me and I like apples, you might want to try that before the next test just to see if it actually has any sort of, now it could be placebo just because I told you it might end up oh my gosh, was it amazing? But that's what I was told at a conference that I went to. I'm not a huge Apple fan, but I used to do that before. So arousal and emotions. Now, when we look at the impact of arousal, there is an optimal, first of all, this curve is the normal curve I tried to draw the entire semester, right? I mean, I failed at this the entire semester. This is like the exemplar right here. But what this says is that for any given task, for any specific individual, there is an optimal level of arousal. What this also means is that people's arousal curves will look different. So what's true for Katie might not be true for Alice. But there, when you look at arousal levels, if this was normal for any given task, you would have somewhere between low and high arousal, this optimal state. And so therefore, this high or this optimal arousal state will result in what? Optimal performance, peak performance. You can't approach a task with low arousal, low motivation, sleepwalk through it, and do your best. It's the excuse that some teams give when they face a team when they're scheduled they should easily beat. They just don't give 100%. Now, sometimes when you look at arousal, you care so much about the outcome that you need to do well. Students are in that right now. You've used your eCampus calculator, and you know exactly what you have to get on this to get this, and all of that sort of stuff that goes on at the end of the semester. And man, some of you might be staring at, oh my gosh, I have to get a 97 on the final. A 97. And so you look at that, and your arousal level is, it's high. And if it's too high, this arousal leads to something we call anxiety. Too much arousal can be debilitating on performance. So arousal can manifest itself into anxiety. And so while there's an optimal level of alertness for each of us on any given task, too little arousal can result in apathy. Too much arousal can result in anxiety. But it's the Goldilocks principle. There's an optimal level of arousal that's just right. And so that's known as the Yerkes-Dodson law, how anxiety impacts performance. And for any given task, for every specific individual, lies an optimal level of arousal, in which that level of arousal will optimize your performance. If you're not at that arousal state, too little will impact your performance in a negative way. Too much will impact your performance in a negative way. So that there's a link between performance and arousal. It goes up to a certain point, in which too much, it goes back down again. It's parabolic in nature. And some of you know exactly and have lived out this chart in your academic career. Look at the picture, drool. In fact, true story, Katie, you were there today. I was conducting a review session in my class before this, and literally it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and everyone said, turn off your mics, they couldn't hear what I was saying, and finally I stopped talking for a second, and we still heard this noise. Katie, what did the noise end up being? Someone completely snoring. I mean, loud snoring. And in fact, you know the gallery view when it highlights their screen in green, right? Camera was not on, thank goodness, but we knew exactly who the student was in a class of 40-something individuals. It was coming through the screen. I felt mortified for them, but not enough to point out the fact that it was occurring. So anyway, that's graphic right there reminds me of that example. Too low motivation, you won't be spurred to action. As arousal increases, it has a facilitative effect on the motivation to perform. You can look at the crown here. For every task and for every individual, there is an optimal level of arousal. It will be different for all of you. And then here, when anxiety impedes performance. And the last aspect, this is the last series of slides, task values. And all of you gave us kind of some short-term goals that you wanted to accomplish. Some of you used that as an aspect last time. What we're being asked to do can impact our motivation. And that tasks can have 3 main values: attainment, interest, and utility. Attainment value, how accomplishing a task fits a specific need. How accomplishing a task fits a specific need. I use the example here of an Aggie ring. Notice there's no year, put your own year in there. People have got their rings. When you look at that and you get inch closer to that, finishing a course reduces your 96 hours down to whatever it has to be. How a task fits an immediate need. Community service hours filled. This is an attainment task. I need to knock off this course in my degree plan. Attainment task. Interest. This is the intrinsic aspect of the task itself. How much enjoyment is derived? Do we have an interest in what we're engaging in? And the way I always explain the difference between interest and attainment value is big event. Now, big event didn't happen last spring because of COVID. Hopefully we'll be able to engage in it this spring. But if you've engaged in big event before, why do you do it? And I always ask students what the best jobs were, what some of the worst jobs were. We had students out the last time we had a big event. They helped us build a treehouse in our backyard for my kids. My kids were running around, and my puppy was running around, and I bought chicken fillet, and it was a good time had by all. And so you look at that and say, all right, what gets me up at 8 o'clock in the morning? And people are there for different reasons. The attainment aspect. Some people had to do it because of community service hours or sorority requirements or whatever. They had to engage in big event because it was an accomplishment, an attainment, something they had to do. Some people engage in big event because they want to give back to the community. This is something that really they look forward to every year. It's one of the things I try to put into my study abroad, these service learning components, being able to give back to the community that you're visiting and leave it in a better place than what you left it. Same thing for the concept of being college students here in College Station. Can you make College Station a better place because you were here for the 4 or 5 or 6 years? For graduate students, 11 years, or however long it takes your community to approve your dissertation. That's the difference between attainment value. Do you have to do it for a checklist reason, or are you doing it because you want to? Now, again, locus of causality. Can it be both? Sure it can. You can have aspects of interest. Anybody here have a very terrible big event job that they went on? It was like not what they wanted, not what they expected. Well, good. Oh, what'd you have? Yeah. Farm labor without tools. Wow. So digging posts and post-hole digging without tools sounds miserable. And maybe you had a good big event. Now, finally, we get to utility. So that's the difference between attainment and interest. It's kind of like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Utility value has everything to do with how this specific task helps you meet a goal. Moves you closer to your end state. The goal is graduation. It's the larger picture in mind. So attainment, interest, and utility. Now, the other aspect about that is, and I don't see it on the task, I want you to write one more task on there. Because these are all well and good. But the one thing that researchers found out, you can have tasks that are high in utility, interest, and attainment, but if the cost of those tasks, time, money, is high enough, those values of the tasks will lose all of their value, or the task will lose their value. If the costs outweigh the values of those tasks, the alarm goes off to get it for big event. You're like, I'll take the deduction and semester points. Sleep wins out over attainment value. I know that cost is an impediment for a lot of students for a lot of different things. You have an interest in something, but not the funds to pursue it. The costs outweigh the value. What will magnify the value of a task is not attainment, not interest, not utility. What researchers have found, aside from these cost factors that can decrease the task values, What can increase task values is this fourth aspect called authenticity. Does it seem like something that you would be asked to engage in the future? Does it have relevance? Will you use this again? So therefore, you look at these assignments you're given in college, and some of you might say, hey, those are really low in authenticity. I'll never use this again. I'll never write about this again. I won't ever have to rely or engage in this again. And so therefore, if the authenticity is low, what it does is it brings down all the other values. It's not seen as being real or relatable or relevant. But the more you can tie learning and outcomes to relevant aspects that someone would be asked or reasonably expected to engage in the future, authenticity magnifies attainment, interest, and utility. And I think that's where we're going to end for this semester. That is it. We're going to leave on the aspect of authenticity. I will remind you that I need everyone to complete course evaluations. You're almost there. 2 more individuals for the undergraduate, 1 more individual for the graduate class. There is no class on the 18th. In fact, for a lot of you, this will be the last time that I see you this year because your test is this time next week. There will be a review sheet that goes out maybe Wednesday. I'm stacked up. It'll probably go out Friday. With just concepts to review. But you'll have the weekend to prepare, test as usual on that Monday. If you can hit by Wednesday that magical 88%-ish, that A-type range for evaluations, then React number 6 is waived, which is really the last writing assignment. If not, that is due on Wednesday the 25th. So you'll know a week ahead of time whether you have to do it or not. If that's necessary, then I'll React, or actually React number 6 is already available for you to engage in right now in eCampus. So React 5, yeah, React 5. There's 6 Reacts in my other class. There's 5 Reacts in this one. So React number 5. Aside from that, Zoom Room. It's been a pleasure virtually seeing you this semester. I'll go ahead and close this out. I was looking at my course rosters for this year. I think I'll see some of you guys in classes next semester. For those who are attending in person, guess what? There's extra tacos here. And I'm certainly not eating extra tacos when I go home. So, and I know that Katie brought the desserts. Kirby, you've got some desserts too. So if you want to stick around and have some desserts, you can certainly grab those and go. But again, it's been a fun semester. Hope that you guys